Hi students, and welcome to the first resource support session for our last subject in term 2, which is leading a performance culture. So we've finally made it to the last section of our diploma of management here, leading a performance culture. This is just like the last one, customer experience. It's actually a double unit, which means it includes 2 units. The first one we're going to be looking at is manage people performance, which will be followed by um, staff recruitment. So you can see here the learning activities are split up with those units in mind. So we're looking now at the leading performance culture subject page. If I scroll down, we've got 4 learning activities for manage people performance, and indeed 4 learning activities for the support the recruitment selection and induction. There is some sort of logical reason why these are put together. And as we progress through this subject, I guess that'll be a little bit more obvious as to why these are what we call clustered subjects. They share the same learning materials or the resources as well. By the end of this session, we will take you through the very first activity called Allocate Work. We'll also look at an element from Assess Performance. So you'll have all of the information you need to successfully complete the first. Almost the second learning activity will conclude these learning activities by the end of next week. So there's going to be 4 resource support sessions which will take you through all of that material. The first 2 will be dedicated to manage people performance. The last 2 support the recruitment selection induction. Joining me is the lovely Alison. Thank you so much for joining in on today's session. Alison, welcome.
My pleasure. How are you?
I'm
I'm
well.
going well.
Everything is well here. Sun shining. We're all happy. We are all happy. So I'm really rapt that you're joining me in this conversation because really the underlying uh, topic of conversation is leadership. And leadership makes up a lot about what we talk about all the way through the course. It's really the core of what we're all about. So I'm really rapt to finally start having some of those conversations directly about this concept of leadership and in and around that. Um, I guess I'll start. We always like to start from a point of, I guess, maybe some definitions or talking about that. So I'm just going to reel off a few ideas that I've got in and around what leadership actually is, what the nature of leadership actually is. And Alison, please, by all means, I'd love you to join in and help paint a picture here for students on what we're talking about when we refer to the idea of leadership work.
Great.
So straight off the bat, the first thing that I will say in regards to leadership, what we are talking about when we're talking about leadership is the ability to influence other people. So we're simply talking about the ability to influence others. It's also been referred to as the ability to mobilize energy or to mobilize other human beings. It's also the process of helping to focus other human beings, sustain and replenish the energy and efforts of other people as well. So professional leadership is actually a conscious choice. It's not an accident, it's a decision. It's something that you decide that you want to go about doing it. You can unconsciously lead without realizing it, but to be a real effective leader, it's generally a conscious decision to make that choice to do so. One thing that's really important here as a distinction that leadership is different from management, and in fact we do have a slide for you. We might just take students through that, but there's a key difference between management and leadership, which we'll talk about in a second. But what we mean, well, I guess the main thing that I want to echo here is that it's not something that is only available to people in a job or role or position of authority. So leadership is not something that's just available to managers of a business. It's not only available to a CEO or a team leader, even though they have the word leader in their title. Leadership is available to every single human being on this planet because it is a conscious choice to make a positive influence or influence other human beings. Or as we say, mobilize energy, get somebody excited, really energized. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about leadership. Um,
In the workplace, Adam, too, I sort of find one, I suppose, distinction between the two things, leadership and management as well. If you think about the other people in the business, a manager is someone who has subordinates and people that report to them, whereas a leader tends to have followers and colleagues and that sort of thing. They're the people that are motivated to work with that leader.
It's a really good point. I like the word fellowship because that's exactly what's required for a leader. So that's a really nice explanation. Um, the interesting thing about leadership, it requires other human beings.
Yep,
So it doesn't matter what skill set I have. If I live on a desert island with no other human being, I can't execute any of my leadership skill because leadership requires the presence of other human beings to be there simply based on what it is actually talking about. And interestingly enough, leadership is also a reciprocal thing. And what that means is you only get to influence others if others allow themselves to be influenced by you. Others can only influence you also if you agree to be influenced by them too. So that's a really powerful thing that that I've just sort of said there. It's reciprocated. It's reciprocal. It requires other people. It requires the participation of others as well. And that's why good leaders separate themselves from ineffective leaders because of the skill set that they're able to bring to be able to create that reciprocation. And likewise, you can only be influenced if you agree to be influenced by somebody else. Have you ever been in that situation where you felt somebody's trying to influence you to do something and you went, no, I'm not going to be part of this? You've effectively quelled or squashed their leadership ability because you haven't reciprocated or allowed them to influence you in that regard.
exactly. And that's why leadership is so important in the workplace, because you hope that everybody is there to achieve common goals, and actually, and that's the key word there, achieve. And that's the good thing about the important thing about a good leader is that they inspire people to achieve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look, leadership, we talk about it in a professional sense, but it's out there in society. We have leaders in our society, and they might be people that stand up and have a view on something, a political issue, or able to have the strength to talk about something. And what we're talking about when we say, oh, he's a great leader, we're sort of saying that that person has an ability to influence the hearts and minds of other individuals. So it's an ability to influence, but it's an also ability, as what you've talked about before, is to create that fellowship, to create a situation where other people go, I like what this guy's saying. You know, when we think about leaders, we might think about our prime
Mm.
minister or our political leaders because that's really sort of the core of what we think about when we think about leadership in this space. Something else I'd just like to talk about, and guess why leadership is becoming it's an incredibly important factor in business. And it's an incredibly important factor for your success as an individual, as a professional in your career. I just want to talk a little bit about the landscape of leadership just a little bit and what's actually changing and why it's actually becoming more and more important. We are actually experiencing a dramatic change in the world. We're experiencing what's called an information revolution. And this information revolution has effectively come off the back of the internet and the ability for any human being just about in this planet to communicate instantly with one another at the drop of a hat. We now have a global marketplace. Australia is no longer competing just against little old Australia with Australians, culture and ideologies and things. We are now competing against everybody. So the industrial age, which is what we've come out of, which was bureaucracies, maintained a very firm organizational structure. The old school structure in the industrial age, and when we're talking industrial age, think manufacturing, so think these large scale manufacturing plants. This age or this era where power was effectively distributed to those according to rank or position. So you had one or two or a small group of people that were managing a large group of people who were basically told what to do and where and how to do it. That's now changing. Organizations are effectively relying on speed in which information can be processed, communicated, and also we're understanding that the needs and demands of customers are changing as a result of that. Customers are looking for the best possible experience, and to provide customers the best possible experience, we need to empower our employees to, one, be able to make decisions, not just say, well, I can't make that decision, somebody else does, you lose your business. And, to be able to provide that information really quickly, customer experience is such a big deal. So we really actually need to empower our employees to take a lot more responsibility than they've ever had before. So I think that just provides a bit of a background, I guess, to the landscape. The people who can coordinate, or the businesses that are able to coordinate their resources to meet the demands of customers, will have that competitive advantage. So businesses are knowing this now, and effectively being able to allow your staff members to, make those decisions, be empowered, help drive the business, help drive the direction of the business, and innovate within the business are the ones that are actually succeeding. Alison, I want to just give an example of something that I um, experienced. I did some leadership training myself a few years ago, or actually probably a bit more than a few years ago. And in that classroom, I remember this very, very well. It was a group of us, about 20, 30 in the class. It was through a Master of Business program, and there was a lot of professionals there of all walks of life. The lecturer, her name was Dr. Nita Cherry, and she has a PhD in leadership, and she's committed her whole life to the understanding of leadership practice, and absolutely fantastic. I'd loved everything about what we learnt in those classrooms and things like that. But Dr. Cherry put a question to the class. I remember it very, very clearly. I'd just like to share that with you guys. And what she said was, you guys are all managers. You guys are all very high up in your own right in the business world, in business. What happens when you guys go away on a 2-week holiday? And what happens on that 2-week holiday when you're away is the organization hums along, everything gets done, all targets were achieved, nothing was that much better, but nothing was worse, nothing went wrong while you were gone. And then she puts the question to the class. She says, is this good leadership? And everybody looks around and looks at each other and says, well, absolutely, it's great leadership. And she says, why is that great leadership? And everyone said, well, you went away for 2 weeks and the organization sort of ticked along and nothing went wrong and everybody seemed to know what they needed to do, which means obviously you've been able to communicate, the best practice, and you've been able to communicate your policies and your procedures, and you've been able to get everybody well organized. It's a well-oiled machine that you can step away from that and everything ticks along. She said, well, I would actually question whether that is actually good leadership, because now that we're talking about leadership as a skill. Now, this is another thing we should also mention. It's not something that it's not something that you're born with. It's something that you develop. It is a skill, just like riding a bicycle is a skill. This is a skill, leadership as well. And what Dr. Cherry said was, I would actually question whether it's actually good leadership practice at all, because we know leadership now is effectively the ability to mobilize energy out of people, to influence other people, and to provide, to be able to replenish energy and motivate other human beings. So if you go away for 2 weeks and there's no change, there's absolutely no change, not better, not worse, she said, I'm actually starting to question what your ability to influence is. And that actually that got everybody talking, because we went, wow, okay, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. So we really want to differentiate a concept between leadership versus management. I think that understanding of the difference between leadership and management really helps paint this picture of what leadership's all about. And Alison, we actually have a page in the learning materials here, which I'm going to tell students about. It's right here. If you go to your learning materials, click on leadership versus management. And Alison, can you see my screen here?
Yes, I can.
Can you see
There it
what's in the
is.
box there? Do you want to start maybe going through some of the differences between leaders and managers? Excuse me, because I think this definitely helps to paint that picture of leadership and what that's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. With sort of, some of those examples that we've got there, so starting with the leaders, visionaries. So obviously that's sort of saying that they can see what might happen and actually take into consideration what the future holds and what it is they're striving towards. So again, that motivation to keep things moving forward. They're collaborators as well. So any great leader that you can think of, they don't just stand there and say, do this, do that. That's not why they're a leader. They collaborate, so they actually involve those other people. So as you were saying before, Adam, you can't be a leader without other people being involved. So you have to be able to collaborate with other people. It's definitely a major skill. Then influences, as we said, it's all about motivation, inspiration, all those sorts of things. It can take some influential skills. You may need to really work closely with individuals or small groups of people to actually motivate them and influence them in certain areas and help them be part of the decision-making process. And that also then, of course, leads into negotiators as well. If they can't have those open, collaborative, influential conversations with the people that they are trying to be leaders for, they're not going to be able to negotiate very well. So bringing everybody into the fold and giving everybody the opportunity to say what they think is going to work or what changes they would like to see, all of those sorts of things, people will go to a great leader for that sort of thing. And the last one I like, leaders cope with change and are concerned with change, vision and direction and with inspiring and motivating people. So that's just it in a nutshell, basically. And then moving across to managers, it's a little bit more cut and dried, black and white, if you like.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So managers are captains. Think about, I'm just going to spin off topic a tiny bit here. Think about yourself, anyone who plays sport or anything like that, or even if you're just a fan, of watching football or something like that. Think of your favourite team. I'm betting straight away you know who the managers are, and you would be thinking probably the coach, perhaps the captain of the team. But if I asked you who were the leaders, you'd probably think the most motivational people out there, the ones that are always patting their teammates on the back and, kicking a goal or scoring a try or whatever, and motivating everybody else around them.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So managers then also, they are analysts. They have to deal with the facts and the figures, if you like. Their responsibilities very much are to probably report to people higher up. But again, remember, as I said before, they have subordinates and people that report to them. So they have responsibility for those people. So they have to be able to analyse the facts and the figures to make sure that things are running properly. They're conductors, so in other words, they will be the people, say, at the team meeting who say, okay, I require finance division to do this and get that achieved by 5 o'clock this Friday, and I need the sales team to increase sales by 5% in the next quarter and things like that. So they'll conduct what needs to happen. If a leader was in the room, they'd sort of say, well, let's talk about how we can get that to happen.
Yeah.
So slightly different tacks on things. Managers then also controlling for those same reasons. They're about the managers. They cope with complexity and are concerned with control, planning, organising and problem solving. So I think there's some good examples in there.
Yeah, there's a good, if we keep going, there's a really nice, and there's little links for you guys to click on there. Please do click on the link. This probably just encapsulates it nice and simply. If you want to go through these ones, Alison.
Yeah, so management systems of people and technology. Okay, so they need to work well all the time. So planning and budgeting, so as I just mentioned there's that example in a team meeting, sort of, they're planning what needs to happen, what budgets they've got, so again, those facts and figures, if you like. Organising and staffing, again, directing who needs to do what for things to get achieved. Controlling and problem solving, so if issues come up, that also takes some leadership styles to do some problem solving, but
Absolutely.
there's going to be some crossovers between both things. A good manager Should also have some leadership traits and leadership skills, definitely. And the same with good leaders. They will have some management skills coming across. So they're not two completely, totally opposite types of
But
people. They'll have a
decision,
blend of the
believe it
skills.
or not, decision making is actually very much a leadership trait as well. So being able to make a decision to decide,
Mm,
it is a core leadership trait as well. Problem solving is very much a leadership trait because it does usually, and good leaders will encompass or use their own staff to assist them in that problem solving domain. So it becomes a humanized aspect. Um, rather than a sort of just a task-based activity. But really, decision
yeah.
making. And look, and I'm really glad you pointed that out because that one can sort of bend depending on which part of the problem solving we're looking at. If it's about aligning people, so we've got the word aligning people here into a room to get them to, invite them to come up with some solutions to problems. Wow, that's leadership. That is leadership. If you're just you see a problem, you make a decision and move on. That's probably closer to management, although being able to make a decision is also a key trait in leadership. So, um, as you can see there, some of the dot points under leadership are creating a vision and strategy. The ability to create a vision is actually ground zero in leadership. Without having a vision or without having a direction that you're pointing towards, there's no way that you can lead. Because
Mm,
leadership is about creating a fellowship, it's about motivating, mobilizing energy out of others, getting people excited about producing and following you and doing what you know doing work. But without knowing where they're following or what they're following, it can't happen. So creating a vision and strategy is very much um, a leadership trait. Communicating, setting directions, motivating. Oh, that's what we talk about. We're talking about influence and we're talking about human motivations. What motivates human beings? Why do people get up in the morning? Why do people decide one day that's it, I don't want to work here anymore? Why do people go why do people do anything? That's what we're talking about here with the idea of motivating action. Um,
yeah. There's a website that I go to sometimes. It's called skillsyouneed.com, and they've got quite a lot of really good information on all the different topics that we go through. And I'm pretty sure it was that site that actually I've used before, and it gives the 6 key traits of leaders, which I think are really, really good.
if you
The
want to,
first one
oh,
is
you've got that on your screen? Perfect.
I haven't got that website on my screen at the moment, but I will bring it up for
Have
you.
a look, see,
Um,
bring it up, and we can. I can flick the
just
screen
get
over to your
my
screen if you'd like.
right. Yeah. Yeah, so it talks about those 6 key traits, which I think are really good. And that's sort of another way that actually shows the difference, if you like, between, you know, managers. I'm just trying to
Versus
see. There we
what I want
go.
to talk about. While you're actually loading that up, it's going to work perfectly. I wanted just to talk about what makes a good leader a little bit, or what some of the traits that we should be focusing on in terms of what are these leadership traits that actually are where it's at. How do we create great leaders? How do we actually, let's talk about what good leadership actually is. And I want to do so in the form of referring to a book called Level 3 Leadership by James Clausen. It's a fantastic read if you guys are interested. And it just talks about the 3 different levels of leadership that occurs, and just talks about the merits of each of those levels of leadership and really what we're trying to achieve as leaders. And I think that'll work beautifully with what you're going to show in a second anyway, Alison. So,
Yeah, there we go. I've got that site up on my screen if you want to flick across.
yep, I'll just do my little bit here and then I'll flip it over to you if
Yep.
that's okay. So James Clausen in his book Level 3 Leadership did actually identify 3 levels of leadership. He identified at level 1 leadership, and he said at level 1 leadership, leaders focus on what's called visible behavior. Level 2 leadership focuses on what's called conscious thought. So one is on visible behavior, second level is on conscious thought, and level 3 leadership is aware of and influences people's values and assumptions. So let's just talk about that, stretch it out a little bit more. So some of the techniques that are identified at level 1 are things like ordering, commanding, threats, coercions, rewards, and incentives. With the focus on level 1 is on influencing visible behavior. The downside to these techniques are that followers find this style offensive and demotivating. So what we're saying is by those level one techniques, so commanding, ordering, threats, rewards, coercion. If I say, Alison, do this or that's it, you're going to get the sack. That's a threat. Now, guess
Yeah.
what? You probably will do what I said you to do. So it is leadership in a sense because I've mobilized energy, I've got you to act, I've influenced you, and I've mobilized your energy to do some work. But guess what? It's going to come with a whole heap of extra baggage too because that's not really the way to keep somebody on a long-term basis motivated. That's going to work in the short term, absolutely, not in the long term. Funnily enough, reward schemes, which is mostly what a lot of organizations and still to this day do very, very, very strongly and rely on it very heavily, are rewards and incentives. So what that means is, Alison, if you're a good worker and you look, if you sell an extra 5 lollies today, we'll give you an extra $50 in your pay packet at the end of the week. Again, that's a very coercive style of leadership. It's saying, okay, if you do something for me, I'll give you a little carrot at the end of it. Again,
Mm.
it's there, it's there, but it's only there for a very short term. That's not going to keep me motivated for the rest of my life. I can tell you that now. It might work for a day, it might work for a week, it might work for even a longer period. And some people, it might work for longer than others, depending on what our values are. But it's going to be a short term. Level 2 is a lot better than level 1, but it still has its shortfalls. So level 2 focuses on what we call conscious thought, and some of the techniques available are things like data, logic, argument, debate, evidence, and history. So what level 2 aims to do is it aims to convince you on a conscious level that doing this is the best decision. Oh, look, Alison, if you here's the stats here. If you actually call 80 people per day as opposed to 60, here's all of the evidence you need that your sales will triple, your business will skyrocket through the roof. It's trying to, use logic and rationale to demonstrate its point, and it's trying to change the way that you actually consciously think about something. So it's
And
more.
again, goes back to that point we said before off that other screen where it talked about being visionary as well. So again, you're looking towards the future, not just dealing with the here and now and what needs to be done today.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So with this level 2, okay, it's a lot better than level 1. It's a lot better than that really short version of just, if you don't do this, there'll be consequences. Problems do occur in level 2 when the individual's values and beliefs are opposed to what the rationale is expressed. So you might convince me with all this data, but it might be against everything that I've ever believed and hold true in my eyes, and it's not going to hold for very, very long. When we're trying to influence others to do work, creative work, if we're trying to foster innovation, if we're trying to mobilize their energy, if we're just trying to create a fellowship, it's really important that we create what we call a buy-in. So the level 3 leadership actually focuses on recognizing and clarifying one's values, attitudes, beliefs, expectations, and it tries to influence somebody at their core values, attitudes, beliefs, and expectations level. The belief here is that influencing somebody on their inner values and attitudes will in turn influence the way that they consciously think and therefore the way they act. So level 1 and 2, which is aiming to change the way you act, level 1. Level 2, aiming to change the way you think. Level 3, it's influencing your inner values, and therefore it's believed that by influencing somebody on their inner values, it will influence the way that they think and the way that they act as well. Some of the tools, some of the things that we can use here to do that are things like self-exclosure, active listening, caring, invitation, protecting confidentiality, being authentic. This is actually a really deep discussion of what we're talking about here. How do you one, get to know what somebody's values, attitudes are, and then how do you find a way to influence them on those? This is the $1 million question. If we had all of the answers for this, we'd be very, very, very rich people. But the concept here is that we really want to get somebody in on their core. We want to influence somebody on what their inner values, what their what they hold as being true. Now, let's just clear up what the word value means a little bit. So, a value or somebody's values is something that somebody that it's the regard that something is held to deserve. Or sorry, it's what we hold as valuable. Um, have you got a better way to explain what values are? So, some examples of values might be things like being honest or reliable or being on time. You know, that might be a value of mine or yours, or it's actually not one of mine. But family, so family first. There might be some situations where your values, what you hold as being valuable, what you hold as being really important, that has a lot of worth and is really, really important principle of the way that you order your life, uh, is what actually sort of is really what we are as at the core as human beings. So
For
one of
some people, it might be, sort of their close friendships and things like that. So if somebody feels very proud of, their close knit group of friends, for example, that can be something that's huge. For one, sort of, I still have 8 or 9 very, very close friends that I went to school with 30 odd years ago. We still get together all the time, talk every week. So to me, that just means the absolute world that, these people I've known virtually all my life are still very much important parts of my little world. So that's an example of, something that means huge value to me.
Is that something that how could you translate that into the workplace though? Is there some way that you could translate that? If I knew that about you, how could I motivate or inspire you on that level? Is there a way? And
I
not
suppose knowing that if, because I'm that type of a person, I suppose, somebody who is trying to be a leader and or a manager to me in a workplace, it would be important for them to know that I guess I am sort of a people person. If you get to know me and develop some level of almost friendship, even in a business sense, we will work well, really well together because I'll be able to be completely open and honest in my discussions. I'll excitedly participate in things that maybe I hadn't previously thought I was capable of and things like that. So that type of a value, if a manager or a leader realises that, and I have worked with some absolutely brilliant managers and leaders over the years who very much, yes, took an interest in who I am, and I've mentioned one manager before a couple of different times. When I worked in the travel industry, I had a manager there who we are still firm friends to this day. And we worked together, 25 years ago. So just the fact that we did, throughout our years of working together, became really good friends, and that was sort of very important to me, working in that small community and a small office space. I didn't just want somebody to dominate and tell me every day what to do. I wanted somebody that I could very much work with and look up to. So she
so
very much displayed all of those leadership traits.
so because you value connections with other individuals and creating those healthy relationships and getting to know people, because they are values of yours, because this
Mm.
leader was able to connect with you on those values, did that create a more, were you more or less mobilized to produce work? Did you produce more work? Did you
Oh,
feel more
I was so
energized?
motivated to do well. She was the owner of the business. So I was so motivated to do well because she made me feel like I was achieving as well. So motivated me for me, but I also got so much joy out of seeing that her business was succeeding because of what I was able to achieve for her. So she was just motivational in every way, shape or form.
That's what we're talking
And
about.
that's
That
got to know
is.
me.
I'm so glad you said that. I mean, that's the essence of what we're talking about here. So, as a great leader, we're wanting to know what our employers or hold or as their values, what's important to them, what really matters to them, and then being able to connect to them on that level, and that is better than any $50 award or better than any presentation that she might have been able to give you to convince you to work harder. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's what we're talking about here. It's not something that's easy. I mean, if we want easy answers, that's great, but It's a very humanized thing, leadership. As mentioned, it requires the presence of other human beings. If they don't exist, then we can't become leaders.
Yep.
Requires their reciprocation. And to get somebody to reciprocate with you, you need to connect on their level. So she's been able to connect with you on your level. Now, with me, one of the
Mm.
values that I have that's really important to me is involvement. I love to be a part of something. I love to be creative as well. So creativity and involvement are two of my most important values in life. I'm a blue sky. I love to be free. I love to be able to come up with ideas. I love to be able to do those things. So if somebody who was my boss or my manager or my team leader was aware of those things, then the way that they could really motivate and energize me and go, hey, Adam, we we really want we'd love to involve you in a group discussion about how we can improve things, how we can blue sky. Let's get creative. We want to spend a couple hours doing something really creative. We want to problem solve. We want to think of new ideas. We want you to be a part of that. We think you can really contribute. I'm buzzing right now. I can't stop. You can't pull. I can't wait to get out of bed tomorrow. I can't wait. I can't wait because I'm so excited to be a part of something. How much did that cost? Not much. That was probably the cheapest, incentive you've ever seen in your entire life. That's going to keep me going forever. Forever. As long as somebody's able to, you know, maintain that, then and I'm not saying that you need to have a creative session every day to keep me happy. There's obviously I've got other values as well, that make up who I am. But it's understanding that factor is what's going to get you guys over the line as becoming that next generation of leaders. Um, yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to share to this? I was actually just going to throw up a quick bit, if that's okay, on emotional intelligence. Is that okay?
Go
It's
for it.
something that we haven't talked about at all in the course. I think it's just a good little sort of pulls it back a notch. Have you heard of the term emotional intelligence before, Alison?
Yes.
It's a new sort of buzzy, as we all know, buzz sort of term. EI or EQ is the two sort of shorthand versions. EQ is as opposed to IQ. Now we know that IQ is the intelligence quotient. It's the system and methodology that we can determine the level of intelligence that any of us might have versus another human being. Now, if you believe that an IQ test is the only and sole version and measurement of intelligence, well, I would suggest you're probably wrong. And so did a gentleman by the name of Daniel Goleman, who wrote the book called Emotional Intelligence. And the definition here that I've got here is that emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize one's own and other people's emotions, to discriminate between different feelings, giving them appropriate labels, and then to use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior. That's really great. I want to read that again. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize one's own and other people's emotions, to discriminate between different feelings, label them appropriately, and then to use emotional information to guide thinking and guide behavior. Another definition I found on Google, I love my little Google definitions. EQ, emotional intelligence, not IQ, but EQ, is the ability to identify, use, understand, and manage emotions in a positive way to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and defuse conflict. Why am I mentioning this? I'm going to show an image. Just let me know if you see this. Does that pop up on the screen?
Yes.
Why am I mentioning this is that this Daniel Goleman developed this four quadrants here of emotional intelligence, and this is sort of how the system works, and it relates very, very, very strongly to what we're talking about in the concept of leadership and influence. If you look at the bottom right corner, it talks about relationship management, which is becoming a leader, being able to influence, being able to conflict manage, build bonds, teamwork, collaborate. This is all the stuff that we're talking about as what a leader actually is. To get there, to get to that bottom right hand corner, now, this right-hand side is what we call social. So this is other people. The left-hand side is self. That means us. So this is us. This is other people. The top is being able to recognize, and the bottom part is being able to, therefore, regulate or change. So what this whole diagram is actually saying is that ground zero in leadership or emotional intelligence, but let's call it leadership. Ground zero in leadership is self-awareness. It's this left-hand box right here. So emotional self-awareness, accurate self-assessment, what we're sort of saying is that if you have no, you need to be aware of your own emotional state before we move over to the right, before I'm able to be aware of other people's emotional state. That means having empathy. So if I'm trying, if, there's no way I could have any empathy for anybody else if I have no understanding on self. Likewise, this top left, if I go down to the bottom left, self-management or regulation, I will not be able to self-manage myself, i.e., I will not be able to regulate my emotions if I'm not aware of them in the first place. So ground zero with all of this stuff is being self-aware. So you need to be self-aware before you can be aware of others or manage yourself. And you need to be able to be aware of others and be able to manage yourself before you can relationship manage other people. If I want to change somebody else's behavior, if I want to motivate, influence, or regulate somebody else, I need to firstly be aware of my own behavior, also to be able to manage my own behavior and all of it as well. So there's a great link there to that knowledge and awareness of your own emotional state, and that's what we talk about by EQ and emotional. The EQ is another level of intelligence. It's another, and it's not something that's ever really been dealt with or sort of stated, except for what Daniel Goleman has been able to produce with his work on emotional intelligence. But I think this is a great link, and students, if you're wanting to know where to start, get to know yourself. You know, start to work out who you are. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your what we call default patterns? What do you do under stress? When things get stressful, what happens to you? What sort of things do you do? What are your sort of regular stuff that you might do that in the cold light of day you go, oh, probably could have dealt with that a little bit better. What are those things that you do? So starting to get to know yourself is ground zero in growing and becoming an effective leader. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. Alison, did you have any examples of situations in life or in work where you've come across what I guess maybe let's provide a real world example of a good leader versus a bad leader. So have you got a situation where somebody, and now knowing what we know about leadership, obviously was made of the right stuff versus somebody who wasn't, and what that impact was? Actually, you've already provided a great example with regards to that, the last example that you talked about where you
Yeah,
friendship and what
and
happened.
in comparison to that, actually, as I've mentioned before, sort of I've been involved in sports clubs and things like that in my local area, and having moved, I've sort of been involved in a couple of different ones and had different makeups of committee members over the years as well. And for example, a president of the sporting club I'm involved with last year, in comparison to the president that we had this year, the president we had this year was a leader through and through, and the club just
Mm,
grew so much. Everybody wanted to come on board and be involved. We had sponsors knocking at our door to actually be involved. We had people wanting to know when was the next social event on our calendar, whereas previously we just had somebody who was sort of managing the day-to-day issues, wasn't terribly motivational, didn't have much drive behind them, not bringing in self-confidence, was still a very, honest person with good integrity and that sort of thing. But those other key traits, as I was mentioning there before, things like drive, motivation, self-confidence, and knowledge of what it is that you're trying to motivate everybody else to be successful in. Having a good leader in something like a volunteer organisation like a football club, having a really strong leader at the front, it made a world of difference. You have no idea, sort of the club, more than tripled in size, and we had a premiership win, and because everybody wanted to do really well. So it was
amazing.
just mind-boggling to see it. It was just absolutely fantastic.
Leadership is potentially the most powerful thing on this planet. It really has the ability to
Mm,
change the world as we know it, and it can change quite quickly too. It's very scary how much power a good leader could potentially have on this planet, and we've sort of seen it before. But it's just amazing when you see great leaders and what that means. Um, like a good leader will not try and just maintain control or is worried about their status. A good leader will always encourage others to be a part of it. They're collaborators. They're people. They're people. They're people that can get other people together, form an alliance between people, get people motivated to work and do. I had a project that I was involved in a year or so ago, and I'm not going to mention the company names, the people, doesn't really matter. I'm not even talking about the project. This particular leader, she was really dynamic. I'd known her for a very, very short period of time, and she said, Adam, I have no idea what you just said there before. I presume it was something incredibly intelligent because you know what you're talking about. She just dropped all of these compliments on me, which were valid compliments, but they were right there. And she gave me a whole lot of rope. She said, Adam, I want you in the next week to come up with a list of A, B's, and C's, D, E's, and F's, because I believe that you have some great ideas and I would love to see what you can produce. Now, well, did I do some work for her? Did I do some work for her? She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew what she was doing. That was called invitation. She invited me into a space. She said, here, I want to give you the keys to the castle, as it were, and I trust you. I'm not going to even question anything. I trust you. Here, go for it. And it's amazing what happens when you show trust in other human beings and you give people responsibility and a little bit of leeway to take what we call ownership on their own space and their own work. And I've never worked so many weekends in my life, not that I want to ever do that ever again, but at the same time, because I actually value having that work-life balance very, very strongly. It's funny we talk about values, but she was able to motivate me to do work outside of what I would normally consider as even a possibility. So
Because you weren't being forced to do it, you were being asked to do it if you were passionate enough about it, and that's obviously what came across.
yeah, well, she didn't have any coercion. She didn't sort of say, Adam, if you don't do this, you're off the team. Adam, if you don't do this, you're going to lose your job. Blah. None of that. She talked to me like a human being. She showed respect. She invited me, and invitation's a big one here. In as a leader, you invite other people to the space. You give people responsibility. You acknowledge their own skills and strengths and weaknesses, which she did in that process as well. She said, look, I think you're the best person for this because of A, B, and C. So she had credibility with what she was saying because she backed it up with some fact. She just let me go. And the work was fantastic. So that's what we're talking about with all this stuff.
Yeah. Do you want me to quickly show you that website,
Love you to.
that Skills You Need website? It's got so much fantastic stuff on there. So I've just opened up the, let me know when you can see it.
I've got to hand the screen
I've
over
just
to you
opened
now.
up the,
I think it's your screen now.
there we go. Can you see that?
5 seconds. Let's see. There we go. Yep, I can.
There we go.
Skills you need.
Yeah, so it's not like a management site or anything like that, but it's just got some really great things on there. So it talks about assertiveness and things like that. When you come across to the leadership skills, it's got things like that risk management that we keep talking about, project management, which we've talked about before. So, the different sort of skills in various areas. So it's got some really great stuff in there, and when you move down, just wanted to go to that key traits. So it's got then different pages you can open up about what is a leader. Leadership is not management, so some of those things that we were talking about there before, and it's very similar information to what we discussed. But I just found some of these interesting, which I just mentioned there before when I was talking about the president of the football club. Sorry, I'm moving that a bit quick. There we go. Key traits for leaders, the section down here. So drive, It is a broad term, but it means someone's being strongly motivated and ambitious. They've got energy, tenacity, take the initiative. Then they've got that leadership motivation, so they want to lead others, desire to lead others. They want to do it. They're not just being told you have to do this.
Yeah.
It's something that they within themselves want to do. Honesty and integrity, I think, is an important one because nobody in a workplace is going to really want to follow someone who's pretty shady and, has very bad reputation, that sort of thing. They're going to want to go for follow somebody who is honest and has good integrity. Self-confidence, obviously, is the huge one. To lead other people, you need to have confidence within yourself. Cognitive ability, so other words, intelligence. You're not going to put someone fresh out of school into a leadership role, to be part of a massive organisation. It might be somebody that's, spent at least 6 months learning the information about the business and got some intelligence behind it, and then get them to lead in an appropriate area. So then the last one, of course, knowledge of the business. So obviously the people that are going to lead the best know where they want to lead people to. So they've got to know what the goals, what's the mission statement, what's the vision statement, what do we need to achieve to make this business successful. So they need to have that knowledge and then share it with the people that they're motivating along to join the ride.
Look, I have to say I'm not really wrapped in that last point because I just think the whole concept of leadership, it's credibility is important, which means, for other people to completely follow, they would hope that you have some understanding and knowledge. But many CEOs these days are very, very successful that come into an industry they know nothing about, and simply because they are great at empowering other people to take lead and responsibility. So,
and that's why this one, I like the way that it says that there, it's thought to be essential. However, it's not always what you have to follow. Lots of examples of highly successful CEOs being brought in precisely because they did not know the business and so would be more likely to encourage destructive
I should have read
innovation.
it. Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't. Great, perfect, great. One that we talk about a lot is authenticity, which wraps up a lot of what you're talking about with honesty, integrity. So being truly authentic means to be truly yourself and not to put on a facade or pretend to be somebody that you're not. Because when we're wanting to follow somebody, if I feel like somebody's being fake, then I don't like it. I don't like it. If I feel that they're being purely themselves and being honest and being really authentic, it's more believable. I like this guy. I think he doesn't try and be anything that he's not. If he says he doesn't know something, he says he doesn't know it. Doesn't try and, pretend.
I've certainly worked with someone who was put in like a team leader type position, but you knew that this particular person just liked having the title and the slightly higher pay than everybody else did, and wasn't motivated themselves to actually lead the team and, sort of be, that they weren't being real at all. It was very much, I have this title, therefore I'm better than you. So that just does not work.
Yep, that they will probably find that they're not getting a lot of fellowship out of their own team, which therefore they're effectively being a negative leader at that point. They'd be better off not even actually turning up to work at that point of time. Look, to be a real leader is actually not easy, Alison. To be truly authentic and be yourself actually opens you up. It actually makes you vulnerable as a human being, because if I'm truly myself to you, Alison, then you really know who I am, and I'm not pretending that I know a bit more information about something, or I can handle that. I was in that situation, or sometimes by saying I actually have no idea, but I tell you what, let's go and find out because it's important. There's more credibility there in somebody that's honest. We talked about honesty. And as a result, it's not easy to be authentic because you effectively become vulnerable. So being a good leader is not an easy thing. We're not saying this is easy at all.
And you will actually get some people that just don't want to be led, don't want to follow somebody else, whether it be in the workplace or elsewhere. So that's where some of those, key skills of a really good leader, I've seen people that way before who've, sort of not wanted to, be a real part of the team or not, follow the so-called leader. A really good leader will know how to actually deal with that and sort of, again, get to know what is going to motivate that person. Obviously, the things that they're trying are not working, so keep working at it, though, to try and work out how they can get that person involved and engaged. And a really good leader will bring somebody like that into the fold and get them involved. There's going to be times, though, where that may not work, and it might be the fact that you've got somebody who's just going to work for the paycheck every week and they don't really want to be there. So, there may be a few that slip through the cracks every now and then, but overall, a really good leader is going to know how to engage, pretty much probably 99% of the people.
Absolute. And look, it's going to lead us into a nice discussion on coaching and on mentoring, but really at times a leader will have to have uncomfortable conversations. You can't avoid it. A good leader will not avoid conflict. They will air conflict. They will try and resolve issues. They will try and be very inclusive of other people and push for resolutions to issues. It's not easy. So I'm actually just going to pull the screen back my way, if that's okay.
Yep.
And what I think we could do is maybe just talk about. There's one question I want to pull up. Hang on a sec. Which is this first question in assess performance. It talks about how you can use effective mentoring and coaching. Actually, just before we do, should probably take you through the previous set of questions. Allocate work. So I'm just going to fly through these questions. We've kind of touched on it already. Might be a sec. Sorry guys, having a slow computer moment.
It is thinking. That's always a positive sign.
It is. Here are the 4 questions. These are all, the first set are automatically graded for you. They don't require any intervention from myself, Alison, or other trainers. You have unlimited attempts. You can't get these wrong because, well, you can, and then you can just have another shot at them. The 4 questions here: manager implements work plans and allocates resources to people, measuring and monitoring results. When they put their leadership hat on, how do they enhance these actions? Okay, they're really quite straightforward questions. You kind of can't get them wrong, so I'm not going to spend too much time. I think that's actually enough time spent. Let's move on to the next set. I think what we were going to start talking about, and what we'll do is we will finish this set next week in the next session, and we'll take you through the last 2 learning activities in the next session. But I think just finishing on the conversation about leadership and influence are nice, and we were starting to talk about the skills a good leader needs to demonstrate, the ability to manage conflict and handle horrible conversations at times. I think it leads to this first question, which talks about effective mentoring and coaching, and what you should think about, or what you should do when you're assisting someone, an individual who might be experiencing poor performance. Alison, did you want to take?
I think it's important. Yeah, I think it's important, Adam, to sort of know the difference between coaching and mentoring as well, because they are 2 completely different tactics. And I've actually sort of got, I suppose, 5 points, if you like, that differentiate between the 2. Starting with the first one, that coaching is task-oriented. So the focus being on concrete issues such as managing more effectively, speaking more articulately, those sorts of things, whereas mentoring, relationship-oriented. Okay, so it's seeking to provide a safe environment when the mentoree shares whatever issues are affecting their professional and personal success.
Right.
So I think that's probably the first one. The second one is sort of more on the time frames, if you like. So coaching is short-term, whereas mentoring is a long-term situation. So, for example, you might say, okay, we have a new piece of equipment that's just come in, so I need to coach you on how to use it. It might be a new photocopier, scanner machine, fax machine. You can do that probably in about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So you can coach a staff member. Bit by bit, this is you do this, you do that. So again, it's that task oriented. So you're saying this is how you photocopy, this is how you replace the paper, this is how you actually change the toner cartridge. And it's short term because you can do it in probably half an hour. Whereas mentoring would be more, if you were putting some new systems into place, so you needed somebody to, yes, use that piece of equipment, but they were actually changing the type of documents that they were going to upload and scan onto the machine. So that might go perhaps over, a month or two, because it's going to be a gradually input process, and they're going to need ongoing mentoring about the actual process that you're bringing into play. It can be even, longer than that, but bigger than that. That was just sort of something that came to the top of my head there. The next one, the third one, coaching is performance driven. Okay, so you're out to improve the individual's performance on the job. Okay, whereas mentoring is development driven. So you're wanting to develop the individual not only for the current job, but for the future of their career and their business as well. So again, sort of you're looking at, so this is again why mentoring is more long-term, and it's about relationship, whereas coaching, it's about improving their effectiveness to perform a particular job right now based on the tasks that they have to do. Then the fourth one, coaching does not require design. So you can sort of coach somebody almost immediately on a given topic. Okay, so if you've got the right person who has the knowledge on a particular topic, they can coach somebody who doesn't have the knowledge in that straight away. Whereas mentoring usually does require a design phase. So in order to determine the strategic purpose for the mentoring, the focus areas of the relationship, the different mentoring models that might be used, and the specific components that are going to guide that relationship, and of course matching the right mentor to the right mentee as well. So you need to design that properly because it's going to be a long-term relationship that you're developing. And the last one is that the coachee, so the person that's being coached, their immediate manager is critical in the coaching process, because he or she will often provide the coach with feedback on areas in which their employment or the tasks that they need to be coached in. Whereas in mentoring, usually, I find this one quite interesting, usually the immediate manager is indirectly involved. So the manager quite often doesn't necessarily have a link to the person that's going to be doing the mentoring.
Yep.
So I just thought that was some really interesting points on the difference between coaching and mentoring.
I've always thought, and I might be wrong, I mean, I really like what you say there. It was fantastic. Is there any merit in sort of discussing the idea of passive versus active? A coach is a lot more
I
active.
think so.
I'll approach you and
Yes.
we'll formalize our way of, a mentor is a bit more passive, come to me if you need some help. I'm available when you need it, that sort of
That's
thing.
right.
There was some
Yeah,
great.
in your typical workplace, that's probably the experience most people have had. Particularly if you're starting a new job, you will do something like an induction session where pretty much you are coached because you are being told you need to do this, you don't need to do that. This is the safe way to do this is the unsafe way to do it. This is where, you park your car every day, so very distinct instructions. Whereas you might actually also be given then a mentor for that first 3 months of probation. So they might just introduce you to have a relationship with someone that you can feel comfortable communicating on a range of topics about.
I think that's the underlying point. You can really express yourself and understand the dynamic of what it is you're trying to understand on a much deeper level by having somebody that you feel comfortable enough to open up to and talk with about things. But a good coach should be able to create the same thing as well. So in the context of, I think it was a great breakdown there. I really appreciate it. I think for the context of this conversation, we're going to plump them all in as one, in the one box. What we're actually looking for here is techniques or effective ideas. What are some things you should be doing if you are going to be a coach slash mentor and you've got somebody that you're dealing with that has poor performance. So in that case, let's think about it from a coaching perspective. Let's get rid of the word mentor, because I think you're spot on with that differentiation. I think it's important. So from a coach's point of view, you're a coach. You've identified poor performance. You're going to have maybe a one-on-one chat with that individual. What are some things you should think about, or some techniques you should do? What are some effective techniques? And that's what I want for this answer here.
So it's all about, yeah, as it says, somebody's experienced poor performance. So you need to actually identify what is the poor performance, what is it that they're not actually achieving, and sort of focus from a coaching perspective, focus on improving that.
How do coaches do that, Alison? What's the number one thing that they'll do to determine that?
I think firstly they need to ask the right questions, actually find out
Ding,
what
ding,
are
ding.
they not currently doing,
Perfect.
as opposed to what is expected of them, and how do you fill in the gaps, how do you coach them or train them, teach them how to get from A to B.
Most people think if I'm going to be a good coach, I need to know everything, and then I have to be able to come here and tell you what you need to know. That's exactly what you don't want to do. That's what we call sending solutions, and sometimes somebody's asking for one. It might be a different situation, but when we're trying to determine the reasons, as you said, you've got to ask questions. So don't go in there and be ready to launch into conversation. Go there with the mindset of I want to understand this person's situation. If you go in with the mindset of seeking to understand, not be understood, it's that Stephen Covey habit of great success. You'll do well. We talk about monologue versus dialogue. So you want to create a dialogue. Dialogue is two people talking. A monologue is me talking at you. Understand the concept that people know themselves better than anybody could ever know them. Alison, if I'm coaching you, you know yourself better than I will ever be able to get to know you on any level. So if I know that, then then the power is in my hands to be able to help you just to get out what's actually happening in your world, in your space, get you to understand what's happening, get you to come up with some ideas, but also get you to work out what's going on. That's one of the most powerful things you can do as a coach, is really just ask questions and listen.
Yep.
And that's really it. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. There's some notes guides. So if we go back to the learning materials here very, very quickly, there is a page on, sorry, I'll find it. Your role as a coach, I think it's called. There it is, your role as a coach. Click on that one for a bit more information on this question if you need a bit of extra help. But consider times that you've had feedback given to, if it was good, if it was bad, what makes feedback good or bad. Another element might be things like the timeliness of it. It's really important not to delay giving feedback where possible. So the longer you delay feedback for somebody, the more anxiety that you're going to create for that person. So understanding that timeliness of feedback is also an important factor when we're talking about effective coaching or mentoring, but mostly coaching for this particular example. So yeah, that's really what we're looking for here, Alison. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to this top question here? We're going to take care of the rest in the next session. Anything else you'd like to add to this question for students?
No, I think that's good. So as we said, think about both coaching and mentoring. So if you're thinking about the mentoring side of things, sort of what sort of a relationship are you trying to form that's going to help that poor performance? What sort of design are you going to put on this? What sort of person would you be looking at to mentor them through the situation, and for how long? So as we said, coaching is usually something fairly short time framed, whereas mentoring might be a little bit longer. So why would you
Yep.
consider using that as an option?
Okay. So, yeah, perfect. We're going to get into it a little bit more detail when we talk next week about performance appraisals anyway. So I think we'll, leave the remainder of that discussion for then. That was a great session today. We'll probably leave it there. Alison, thanks very much for your contributions and your attendance. Really enjoyed having the discussion on leadership with you today. I think it's really beneficial for students as well. Join us in the next session as we'll take you through the remaining questions in this learning activity, the last two learning activities for managed people performance, which is under the uh, what's the leading a performing culture subject. So by the end of next week, you'll have completed all of these learning activities. There'll be two more resource support sessions taking you through those, followed by an assessment support session taking you through the remainder of these assessments. Thanks for your attention, and thanks for joining us, students. We hope you've gotten something out
Thanks,
of today's session.
everyone.
Beautiful. We'll see you in the next session, guys. Thank you.